After 25 years of silence, David Adair, now a space technology transfer consultant, has come forward with his amazing experience inside the military's top-secret UFO facility.
I was 13 years old when I built my first rocket, and it left the backyard at about 3,500 miles an hour. I was able to build it out of a construction machine shop that my father owned when he used to work for the mechanics and racing enterprises, and we had plenty of equipment and tools that allow such manufacturing to be done. As a matter of fact, our shop's very similar to a rocket shop in equipment and material. Simple essence, it's able to create a magnetic field capable of holding a thermal fusion reaction inside, like a chunk of the sun contained in a magnetic bottle. And when you tap that power, it allows you to have tremendous thrust, which is what makes the rocket go forward. And that was the first thing that's different about the room. He pulled the big covers off this thing, and it was interesting. It's an engine that's about the size of a school bus. And this engine is pretty much a much larger version of the thing I built. It's also an electric magnetic fusion containment engine, but it is sophisticated and it is powerful. I would have to compare mine to it. Would be like I had a Model A and this thing was a Ferrari. I mean, it's just tremendous, powerful difference, but we both were of the same engine breed. And this one had been damaged right in the center of the core. In the type of configurations we build, we have dual particle accelerators that cause the fusion reaction right in the center of these accelerators. They asked me to look at it and describe to them how I thought the thing functioned. And I asked them, you know, how come I'm telling you about your engine? And they said that the engine was recovered in a project they was working with, and they wasn't sure how everything functioned on it, and personnel that were available to work on that was not available anymore. They said, sure, as a matter of fact, you can climb on it if you want. So I got up to the engine, and then something really unusual about the engine, other than the design, the alloys itself, just the sheen and color, looked like iridescent color, like when you hold a CD disc to the sun and you see the rainbow. Imagine those kind of colors covering this entire engine, and glowing like that. It's really pretty. The color of the engine was unlike any metal or alloy I was ever familiar with. And when I walked to the engine, there was a shadow on the engine. Now, I just told you that the rooms were built where you couldn't have shadows. When I stuck my arm out to it, there was a shadow on the engine, but right on the table there was no shadow. So it's not a light casting the shadow on the engine. The engine is picking up radiation off my body. So I back away from it, the shadow dissipates. When I bulk back up, it's back on. And so when I put my hands on the engine to pull myself up on it, that's where it's interesting, because the alloys in some places were so thin, it was translucent. You could see through it like a sheet of amber. So when I laid my hands on it, this really interesting swirl pattern would come off wherever my skin was touching, and they would swirl out through the metal, going out through the alloy. And I didn't know of any metal that could do that. So I thought, wow, this thing is heat sensitive. It's picking up my body heat waves like that. So when I crawled, and they were really neat looking, smooth type wave flows coming off my hands. So I pulled myself up on the engine and started walking over it, and it was huge. It was radically different than mine because it was just so much of a different design. And the way they ran the fusion flows and the way you would run fuel in a fuel line of an engine, this thing was totally different. There was no wiring. Now my engine was covered with miles of wiring, so I could get all the firing orders right toward the cyclotrons, the particle accelerators.
Did you immediately know that it was alien at that time?
I suspected when I put my hands on it, it felt so different. It felt like a frog belly. If you ever, I don't know if people play with frog bellies, but I did. It looked wet, but it wasn't wet. It's just so slick looking, but it wasn't slick. And it was just amazing. But it also had such a texture, and as soon as you touched it, it was cold in the air-conditioned well in the facility, but the minute you touched the metal, it became your temperature instantly. I don't know of any alloys that can do that. So I started going, whoa, this may not be from around here. So I'm walking down the engine, and I go up to where the main core cells are in the particle accelerators. There's a hole blown out there, and I step down into it just to get a better look. Now, at this point of view, I'm down in a hole in the engine, and the walls are real smooth. They're so smooth, the blast, these temperatures like that engine of mine, they run at 100 million degrees centigrade. You work with plasma physics. So when the field dropped down, this engine's metals were exposed to that kind of temperature, vaporized. And then I realized what this thing was. They grabbed hold of me, the Air Force guys did. We got back in the golf cart and we were riding back up to the surface. And I was sitting there thinking, I just realized what this engine is. It's a symbiotic engine. The engine is alive. It is an engine that's capable. The reason they couldn't figure out the firing order is that the tubing that was cascading all over its body looked like the same pattern you would have from a brainstem of a neurosynaptic ordering firing order. So what's happening is when the pilots sit down in their seats, their thought waves drive the engine. When I first touched the engine, I was curious and awed by it. The wavelengths were smooth off my fingers. When I was getting down from it, I was totally angry. The engine was not picking up radiation heat waves. It was picking up mental thought energy. That engine is capable of a symbiotic relationship with the pilots. The briefing was set up by Dr. Greer with CSETI, which I think is the Center for Research for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and he's in Asheville, North Carolina. And he's a MD, an ER doctor. And Dr. Greer is a very intelligent man. So he had set up a meeting for Congress he had set up within the political structure and framework to run the UFO question right through the normal channels, which all 3 years I've been watching stuff, and he's the only one that got that far, and I was pretty impressed with it. So I finally decided to jump in there. He had 12 other witnesses besides myself, and we all testified to him at that time. And there was about 300 people there. There was a lot of staff there, but there was a lot of senators and congressmen. I recognized some of them. Some of them I'd known before anyhow. And we got in some serious discussions at the time. The next day, we were supposed to talk to the press. The other 12 were allowed to talk to the press. I was not allowed to talk to the press. Right? But there was a lawyer in front of me. His name was Steve Lufkin. And Steve's story was that he was 18 years old in 1960 in the basement of the Pentagon. He was an encryption soldier, officer in the Navy, or in the Army. And their job was to break codes. And his senior staff guy walked in and laid down 3 pieces of metal, and one of them was about a foot long, had writings and hieroglyphics on it. And they tried to decipher it, and they couldn't because they didn't have a Rosetta Stone or anything to work with. So while he was saying that, I was going, oh, great. So I start writing all this stuff down. And I hand Steve the paper, and Steve looks at the paper and goes, and like any good lawyer under testimony, he goes, I swear I've never met this man before. And I thought, great. So when I got up, what rattled everything was he had about 12 different emblems, and he remembered them. I hit all 12 emblems. So the way I told the Senator in Congress, I went, how could I do that? Simple. I was standing on top of the engine that piece of metal came from. As a matter of fact, there's about 98 different emblems on this engine. I was born with photographic memory, and I got them all. So if you'd like to see them, here they are. Also, I memorized how the engine was built. So let's build another one.